Welcome to day 2. Thanks for coming back. And let's just do a little recap of yesterday. I know it was pretty simple, but it gets harder. So let's enjoy the simplicity while it lasts. Just in a nutshell, yesterday we were looking at a simple circle. And we saw that a simple circle is not so simple, right? It takes a lot of time to get those curves really mirroring each other around the sphere. Where do we go from there? Well, we go to 2 circles, right? Just like anything that organically grows. You know, it starts out as 1, becomes 2, and then 2 become many, right? So, but the interesting thing is, right, when we have only 1 circle, there's no relationship. It's only one thing, right? As soon as we have another circle, there's a relationship, and we need to talk about that relationship. It's important that that relationship works well, right? So that's what we're getting into today. Yesterday we started with our circle, and very few things are that regular. It's more likely that we are drawing things like this. This is a great prop. You know, I found a whole bunch of fake fruit at the thrift store. Thrift store is the best place to find art materials in a way, and objects to paint. I just painted it white. This is going to be great for us when we get to talking about value and about how to render a form. But for the meantime, we're just using this from the point of view of drawing. So we'll set this up over here. It really would be ideal if I could just flatten it. Okay, nothing is as perfect as this, but it's a good place to start. Again, we just jump right into it. I'm just going to roughly try and get that size circle for the base of the pear. So maybe it's something like this. Then I can ask myself, is that roughly the right proportion? In this case, it's a little longer than it is wide. That's something really important just to pick up on, because that is an essential proportion. Everything we look at has some essential relationship, and it's always about height to width. And ask ourselves, is it the same? Is it taller? Is it wider? I've drawn it slightly wider. It's slightly taller, so let me have a go at that and just make it slightly taller. And again, we keep our lines light. Don't worry if they don't look good. I'm going to make mine messy so that I give you permission to be messy as well. Just erase them back. And then ask ourselves, is that a better proportion? If we need to make a little tweak, feel free. So it's a little more open on this side. That feels closer, right? It's not good, it's not great, but it's closer. And that's the only important thing we need to worry about. Let's just get close, and the refinement happens as we develop it. Drawing is like anything else. When we're trying to write something, compose an email, it's not necessarily perfect word for word as it comes out. We get the basic idea, we refine it, we change some words around, and what we find is we have something wonderful at the end, hopefully. In this case, same idea. Okay, yeah, give or take. Now, I want to just find the approximate center of that, so roughly around here. Now, I'm just looking at this, right? So we could say that there's 1 circle here, and in order to draw the top part, we could say that there's another circle, and they overlap. This is a nice way to use the same concept to develop itself. And again, you just go for it, don't measure it. Just draw the circle where you think it might be. Now, when I look at this, I can see, okay, it's kind of the pear is a little tilted. That little circle up here is not centered on this circle. And this circle itself is lopsided. It kind of leans that way. We want to do the same thing. Let's shift over this one. And again, right, this is why we keep things super light in the beginning so that it's easy to make corrections, easy to erase. Today I'm using that Canson Bristol paper. If you want to pick some up, there's a link in the description. Any good paper will work. Anything you find at the local art store. Maybe that's a little better, but now it's looking a little tall altogether. Maybe I drop this down a little bit. That's feeling a little better. We get rid of that, right? Always get rid of what you don't need. Now I'm taking a look at this one and I'm saying, okay, it looks fullest at this point, meaning it's the furthest point out. It's fullest here. And on the other side, it's fuller here. We have a strong curve here. It curves quickly, and over here it's more of a gradual curve. On this side, it does something similar, but it's a little straighter through here. So we just observe these things, take them in, and then just let our hand interpret it. That's the idea. In this case, let's be a little fuller here, which is already pretty good, but let's have this taper and come in a little bit down here. Something like that. Now on the other side, we are a little fuller, and that curve comes in a bit. One of the ideas we're dealing with right away, right in the beginning of our training, is this idea of going from average to specific, from big to small. It's always the way. We're looking for the relationship between the big shapes, between the big objects. So then we saw that this is coming in a little quicker. If we look at this circle up here, right, we can see the 2 points where this circle and this circle meet. It's a little point here. It's a little intersection, right? An intersection of form. And if we just look at them, you can see, oh yeah, they're kind of level with each other. But this one is more slight, this one is greater. There's more of a belly here. So we just want to try and get that. See, and at this point, what we can start doing is, rather than seeing this as two distinct shapes, let's start seeing the two shapes as one shape. This is such a fundamental concept. Whenever we're looking at a composition or anything in front of us, we're always distracted by all the bits, but what we want to see is the harmony. We want to see the bigger picture and see how the smaller things fit into it. That's the ticket right there. Next thing is, we're still a little too tall on our pear, so we want to be a little lower. You see, each one of these corrections gets us closer to the ultimate shape that we want. So you might find that you need to use your kneaded eraser when you want a little more control over what you're erasing, because you can shape it to a point. At this stage, do not worry whatsoever about the shadow, about the light and shade. We really want to focus on just seeing contour, and which is this line here, and just getting comfortable working with flat shapes. So it's always a good idea to develop slowly and steadily. These concepts build one on the other. So we talked about this yesterday, of just rolling the eraser across the form just to lighten up the lines, right? Let's lighten them up. And we have a little bit of a faint image of what was there. So this is a nice little way of refining our drawing. So now what we do at this stage, you just pull back a little bit. Just let yourself take the whole shape in, and then just don't think about it, just see what's different. Let your eyes flit back and forth between both images, and you'll see something. Okay, a couple things I'm noticing. That there's this kind of angle in a way through the pear. We're a little fuller up here, but a little fuller down here. and we're a little squatter, maybe a little flatter, not quite as nicely rounded on the bottom, a little shorter, a little flatter. I'm just going to let myself make a couple of refinements. So I'm using some straighter lines now at this stage. Right, you see we come up over here. We have this little bit of an angle up. We have a little bit of a flat shape here, a little bit of an angle here. And then at the top we have this nice little curve. Something like that. And we can keep refining this and refining it and refining it until we have the exact shape. Again, do it mostly by eye. But if you wanted to check it at some point, you could just take a piece of tracing paper, put it over your original object, lay that on top after you've traced it. And even if it's not the same exact scale, it doesn't matter. You'll still see the contour and you'll see if your shapes and the lines are parallel. That's a nice way to check it, but it's not important. We could also pop in the stem at this point. So I'm just looking at it and I see it's a little off center, right? It's not through the center of the form. It's somewhere over here. And it has a little bit of a width to it. Now, this is a nice way to see how two objects become one object, and how, whether or not we appreciate it, even this object is in relationship to the overall paper. But that's something we're going to talk about in the next lesson. So at this stage, right, those two circles became one shape. We're going to do the same thing again, this time looking at the cast shadow. But let's forget about the fact that there's light and shade here. Let's still keep it as a flat object, ignoring any value, ignoring the feeling of it being round. We're just looking at this shape in relation to this shape in relation to this shape. And again, once we have something established, it's much easier to start adding onto it. So I'm just kind of coming over. The furthest point out is, like, if I'm just looking at it, just eyeing it, it's about a pear width out is where the shadow ends, right? The shadow shape. And then I'm looking at, like, where does it meet the pear here? Is it halfway? Is it a quarter? It's about a quarter, right? So we can kind of come out through here. You draw it as you see it. And again, we draw it, we observe it, look for key differences, and refine that process. So I'm noticing that there's this little change in plane at this stage, which is a little bit beyond the edge. We start going up. Over here, we're starting to come over. At this point, we start turning, turning, turning. So let's do that. Come down. At this point, we start going up. At this point, we start coming over. And then we turn and turn behind. So that's a nice way of looking at it. We're looking at the big shape. We're ignoring any variations within it. Let me look at here. Is this in the right place? Is it about a quarter? Well, not really. It wants to come up just a little. Maybe out a little bit as well. Give or take. And then we erase the bits we don't want. You see, at this stage, we have the basic shape, and it's more or less looking the way we want it to. But if you have time, take it further. Really refine this contour. Really get these movements exactly as you see them. So today we learned how to make one shape into two shapes and see those two shapes as one greater shape. This is interesting. You can keep practicing at home by taking any object, break it down into its most simple shapes, and then develop it and refine it. So where does this go next? Well, we have one pair. Well, what if we introduce another? It's the start of a still life. But getting the relationships right and the scale between the objects is really important. So we're going to talk all about that in the next lesson. I hope you'll join me. And of course, if you are enjoying this lesson, do subscribe and hit the bell. You'll be notified when new lessons are uploaded. And also, at the end of the month, there is a weekend workshop. It's where we take all these lessons, tie them together into one exciting project. I hope you'll consider joining. There's a link in the description below where you can register, and I hope to see you there.